and Lord and Lentini. I'm the founder of Lord and Lentini, and I'm partnered with Southwestern Consulting for coaching, sales training, and leadership training. And I also have my own work that I invoice and bill through Southwestern called No BS Coaching. It's based on my new book. And what I talk about is the stories we tell ourselves are the things that hold us back, especially for leaders of sales teams. Whatever your position as a leader of salespeople, it's important that you begin to up level. John Maxwell talks about that. Up leveling yourself when you expect your team to up level. And many leaders don't do that today. In fact, everyone is telling themselves a story. And I want to wake people up to the story they tell themselves because mostly they're self-limiting. I'm going to show you my t-shirt today. It's called the Acorn Brain, the small-minded thinker. That's what I call it. The small-minded thinker is that little voice that we all have. Dr. James Doty, in his book Mind Magic, talks about how the brain works. He's a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist because he's doing this work. And it's fascinating as you apply it to waking up from the stories you tell yourself that are self-limiting. If you're judging your sales team, and I hear this all the time, believe it or not, oh, the sales team they're not working hard enough. They don't know what they're doing. It's fascinating. Whether it's leaders or team members that support sales teams talking like this, it's a self-limiting story. And it's fascinating how much of what we tell ourselves actually shows up in life. Now, that's for masters of circumstance. The victims of circumstance don't believe that. They believe what they see. What I encourage people to do is to start realizing you're seeing what you believe. So here's what Dr. James Doty says about the brain. That 10% of the brain is our conscious mind. The other 90% is split evenly between the unconscious and the subconscious. The unconscious mind is running everything you never have to think about, like growing your hair, except for me. Obviously, it's not working. Growing your nails, breathing, your heart beating, things you never have to think about. That's half your brain, or 45% of the remaining 90%. Let's do the math, okay? So what I'm going to talk about today is that other 45% called the subconscious. And it's fascinating how the subconscious works. Dr. Doty says, think of your subconscious as working this way. One is the filing system, and the other part of it is the bloodhound. I'll explain. The filing system is the story you tell yourself. So when you start to tell yourself a story about your job, your team, your spouse, your life, your family, the bloodhound sets off, gathering evidence to prove it's true. That's how insidious this little system is, which results in the voice that's constantly talking to ourselves. That little voice trying to tell you the team's not working, you better find out, you better get out on the road. Your boss doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Your spouse, if she only knew how she made you angry, and vice versa, it might be him making you angry. It's what you're filing, and then your bloodhound sets off to gather evidence despite any evidence to the contrary. It's called confirmation bias. So it takes a lot of power to wake up from that voice running you. That filing system, you have to be very particular about what you put in the filing system. Most people aren't. Sadly, today, even teachers and professors, in some cases, not all, I don't like to generalize, are teaching people what to think, not how to think. Did you ever hear a teacher or professor talk to you about managing your mind? That you do not have to believe you're thinking, and in fact, that what you believe is what you're seeing. That makes you a responsible creator, a leader who takes responsibility when you question your beliefs. When circumstances do not match your picture, you're gathering evidence to prove it's true if you believe it. Now you're believing what you see, which makes you a victim and powerless. How does that sound? Does that sound energizing to you? Today we have a society of leaders that are pointing fingers at each other. They're doing this. I'm not wrong, they're wrong. They're not wrong, they're wrong. I'm not wrong, they're wrong. Each side does it. It doesn't matter what side you're on. And that's whether it's religion or religious beliefs, politics, at work. We have developed a sport called making others wrong so we can be right. It feels good to be right. We forget when we want to be right, we're making everyone else wrong. And that's a place where leaders fall down often. Instead of being curious. Curiosity is really something that self-aware people develop. They don't just quickly make a judgment about everyone else who disagrees with them. They question themselves and others. How did you come to that view? What facts did you use? Is that just a personal opinion? Is it something that you see in me? That's asking for feedback from others. How could I be a better leader? How could I be a better neighbor? How could I be a better citizen? Marshall Goldsmith says at the end of every day, there's 6 questions to ask yourself. Did I do my best today to create sound and healthy relationships with others? Did I do my best today at work? I like to add a question. Did I do my best in questioning my own answers? Did I recognize my power to create? Did I take accountability for my part in what occurred today? Now, I don't want you to take my word for it. After all, one of the books I wrote is You Might Be Full of Shit If. Now, if you don't like the profanity, you can also buy the book You Might Be Full of Number 2. After all, we know better, the woke edition. In both of those books, I'm not making fun of anyone. In fact, what I'm questioning is our loss of this idea to have a dialogue with people and respect and appreciate all the differences in life. Imagine if there was no contrast, if we were all the same, we all thought the same, we would not even know we were alive. The creative life force that created an infinite universe, and we're floating on a little ball, a garden planet. Probably, physicists have said, in relation to the size of the universe, we're no larger than a grain of sand. Imagine that. Yet the hubris of humans have us thinking that we're general managers of the universe. We live in something so amazing that every time we think something small-minded, our faith or religion is the one, our political preferences are the one, our ideas on the job are the one. Anything that's small-minded, can you imagine that coming from the creative force of a universe? Our job in this life is to overcome all our small-minded thinking. And sadly today, probably 90% of the population, I think I'm being generous, believes they're thinking. They're living as victims and what I call reactions. I hyphenate the word. They're constantly reacting to things they cannot control and wasting all kinds of energy. When you become the master of your circumstances, you begin to take accountability and responsibility for what you're creating. The first thing I do when I'm coaching people is listen to the stories they're telling themselves. And I ask them, first tell me what's happening, what seems to be happening. And as they describe all the things that are going wrong, my company just doesn't listen, my company can't get out of its own way, my sales team isn't working, my bosses are a challenge, they. Every time they use the word they, I note it. I ask them to write me the story, and everywhere they use a complaint or the word they, when they're complete, when they're done, I ask them to change all the names, all the complaints, all the theys, and add the word I. So if they're complaining the company has a poor culture, or it's not working, or my team isn't working, they have to say, I'm not working. My culture is poor. How I contribute to the culture, I contribute to the culture, is poor. I'm the difficulty in my relationships. Some people get it. They get it. I've had people read that statement back to me and say, okay, I get it. I'm creating this. They're a fit for my coaching because it's challenging to hear things from someone else who says, you're creating this mess. The good news is that means if you created the mess, you have power to create whatever you want. And let's get on to what you want and file that in the subconscious and get your bloodhound tracking that, what you want. Now, I confess, especially since I wrote the book, I'm full of shit somewhere. And I have my own stories. And I have a coach to help me with my own stories. I'm also, though, thinking about it every day. In 2003, I wrote the book, Wake Up, Jump Into Your Life. That was, mostly for me. It was my time to wake up to my power to create a life. I recognized I was responsible for the mess and all the messes. And there were plenty of good things. But at that time, I held the license for a national sales training program and believed I could never give it up. Who would want my own work was the little voice in my head. I was filing, no one would want my own work. I couldn't do this without a national license. I gave up the license in 2003 and started my own work. And it's been developing fabulously ever since. Synchronicities and people I meet along the way since I changed my mind have been fascinating. The people I've met. I have clients for over 20 years that are still in my work because they're still working on catching their story. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff said in the early 1900s, 1920s, 30s, he lived until the 40s, you can let that little machine run you or you can run it. And he said that most people are in a bourgeoisie sleeping man state. And that it takes a force of will to wake oneself up in one's lifetime. This is daily work. It's not a burden, however. You have to prove this to yourself. That's when you own it. Never follow anyone or anything blindly. You prove it to yourself. You make your life an experiment. You can choose. Am I a victim of circumstances or a master of my circumstances? That's up to you. And I can tell you it's a journey. After all these years of doing this work on myself with the help of coaches, I still have times where I fall asleep. We alternate between those states. Waking up, though, does take a force of will. I call it going to the neuro gym. If you've ever gone to the physical gym or begun an exercise program or running or walking longer distances with the purpose of exercising, when you start, the body physically aches for a period of time, for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and then it becomes accustomed to it. It's the same thing if you start going to the neuro gym daily. At first, your brain will ache, but not ache in a physical sense with a pain. It will ache because as you stretch it, that acorn brain, right? That acorn brain, that little voice will say, oh, wow, you don't want to do this. This is crazy. Why would you want to work on yourself? Why would you want to wake up? It's too much of a burden to question your answers every day. This is my passion, by the way, to wake people up to their power to create in their lives, to raise the consciousness of humanity one person at a time. If I left this world today, I'd be content. I've been successful at it. I am successful at it. I have clients I'm waking up every day, and they help me along the way as well. And I have a coach who helps wake me up to the fact that that is my purpose in life. How I learned it is because on November 13th, 2002, I was conducting a sales training class for that national sales training program, the license I held. It was my own business, so to speak. It was not my own work. 1 second I was fine, and the next second I needed an ambulance. The next day, I flatlined. One second I had two friends at the end of my bed. The next second, I was one with everything and nothing. Oh, actually, it was November 18th. It was 5 days later. I just had a Biden slip. We all have those. So on November 18th, 1 second, two friends at the end of my bed. The next second, I was one with everything and nothing, one with the infinite, immense light, immense grace, immense mercy. And those words do not describe it. And only the now. There was no past or future. And that little voice, that little acorn brain that's on my t-shirt here, it didn't go with me. That voice stops because there is no past or future. I call it the now on steroids. It was a scene and a scene and a scene. So the first scene was immense light, knowing I was immensely loved unconditionally, and knowing about the universe. I was one with the infinite. The next scene was a life review. I was surrounded by family and friends who had passed, And what flashed before me was the lives I had touched, all the good I had done. I'm not going to go into commentary about sin, and perhaps it was because I've always believed that we lived in something amazing that would not make us wrong for the mistakes we make. So perhaps, again, what we believe is what we see. I'm going to leave you to ponder that. So I had always believed that we're here to make mistakes. We're here to fall. We're here to fall and get up and fall and get up and hopefully learn. And if we don't learn, it'll repeat. What we resist persists. So we'll keep getting the opportunities to learn. Maybe with a different cast of characters, maybe with the same cast of characters. Only the good I had done. People I had bought sandwiches for, helped move, family and friends that I had helped, even people I had smiled at, people I had given money to, every life I had touched, all the good I had done. The next scene was a question from a voice I cannot describe to this day. I'll do the best I can. Stay or go? Was a question I was asked by a consciousness. My consciousness responded with, "Thy will be done." And I can tell you, I had many moments where I had surrendered like that, but also I was mostly in the past or in the future, regretting something in the past or wanting something else in the future than what I had already. Like wanting my own work, but lamenting it hadn't shown up yet. The next second, after that "Thy will be done" surrender, I was right back in intensive care. I couldn't speak for a while. I was blown away by what had just occurred. The two friends were still at the end of my bed, and eventually I asked them. I started with, "Something happened." And they said, "Oh yeah, you flatlined. The nurses and doctors came in, your alarms were going off, and they said, 'Out, this is it, call his family.'" And they went to the waiting room and started calling my family and friends. Sometime later, a nurse came out and said, "You can go back in and sit with him. He's stable now." Little did I know I'd be in the hospital for 60 days straight, 40 out of the next 60, and 6 months out of work. But gratitude was overwhelming. Even waiting for the ambulance, I was grateful. People were asking me in the office, because one second I was fine, the next second I needed an ambulance, and I went to my office staff and said, "I need an ambulance." They were asking me, "How are you doing, Steve?" while we were waiting. And I said, "I don't know how my body's doing, and I'm grateful." I had this wave of gratitude come over me. Like it was an inkling that this was a forest fire or a flood that would promote and bring on new growth for me. And all throughout the hospital stay, mostly, I was grateful. When the EMTs arrived on November 13th, they asked me the same question, "How are you doing?" And when I responded with, "I don't know how my body's doing, and I'm grateful," you could tell by the look on their face. It was all scrunched up. This guy needs a shrink and an ER doctor. Gratitude is an important key for people who are holding themselves accountable for what they're creating. People that know they're always seeing what they believe. That's manifesting. And gratitude and surrender to the moment is embracing life as it is. It's looking at each occurrence as an observer and knowing that on some level you created it. Holding yourself accountable. and being grateful for what shows up. Life is a friend, it's there teaching us. When we, for example, want something big and we start to picture it, and it doesn't come on our timetable, it doesn't arrive fast, there's often delays that are the teachers preparing you for what you want, especially if it's something big, if it really stretches you and makes you uncomfortable. So surrender each day to what shows up with gratitude. You don't have to be grateful in everything. Rather, you don't have to be grateful for everything. You want to be grateful in everything, knowing that while it might be uncomfortable, it's there to teach you and prepare you for this big dream you have. Imagine the Wright brothers telling their neighbors they're going to fly. They had people telling them they were nuts. Thomas Edison, Martin Luther King, who had this big vision of society, people were telling him he was nuts. Gandhi, telling people that the British will leave India without a shot fired, that they will have their own India, the people of India would be their own ruling, governing authority at some point in time. If you have a big dream, honor it. Begin to picture it. Use the visualization power of your mind. Imagination is limitless after all. Use that power. Picture it. Feel what it will feel like when it happens. See yourself there. Picture it in detail. As long as it's not involving rearranging other people's lives. For example, you can't say, I'm going to be the CEO of this company one day. You could say, I'll be the CEO of this company or something better and bigger. Because now you're not presuming you have to kick the current CEO out. You're just imagining yourself as a CEO and a leader. And picture yourself interacting with people as a leader. If you want to be an author, picture yourself writing it. Picture a cover. Picture yourself signing books at a book signing event. Picture yourself giving interviews, being on podcasts. Picture it in detail and feel what it will feel like. Dr. Doty talks about this in that book, Mind Magic, in his book. Now you're filing something grand for the bloodhound to get on the trail of, picking up the scent. And you'll see synchronicities occur that will amaze you. When I knew I wanted to do my own work, I had to honor the non-compete of that program, that sales training program, for 2 years. The idea came to me, write my own book called Wake Up, Jump Into Your Life. And I started teaching that, and people signed up. Some were actually from those training programs. It was not a competitive program. It was about waking up to the power that we have to create. I started that 21 and a half years ago. And gratefully, I have helped many people wake up to their story. And don't make yourself wrong if you feel like you have woken up from time to time and fallen back asleep again. That's what humans do. We need that contrast so that we can become the conscious creators. We have to become the observer, developing a level of thinking above our thinking. And the contrast helps us become aware. Oh, I've fallen asleep. I'm telling myself a story about this work, about this client, about my spouse, about my children, about my team. Get off the story you are telling yourself. Recognize the stories. They're keeping you stuck. Now, you don't have to hire a coach. You could. I'm available. You can always email me, steve@stevelentini.com. I have a team of coaches that do this work. I take on certain clients that are willing to take this journey on and go to the neuro gym. And when the book comes out, you can pre-order it. You can message me on Twitter, SP Lentini, on Twitter at SP Lentini. You can email me, slentini, L-E-N, T as in Tom, I-N-I, at southwesternconsulting.com. I'm glad to help. It's what I do. I have testimonials for people that have had amazing manifestations, amazing things that they've done in their life. Don't take my word for it. If this resonates with you, it reached you for a reason. Muhammad once said, "What reaches you was never meant to miss you. What misses you was never meant to reach you." St. Paul said that Christ said everything works together for good. Doesn't matter your faith. We live in a miracle. Where you're making others wrong and yourself right is a story you're telling yourself. If it's about your team, if it's about your mate, if it's about your circumstances, if it's your little voice telling you you're less than others, you could never do that. It's because it's uncomfortable. By the way, if you think you're better than most, that's a story that's going to keep you from reaching and rising your highest potential. As you rise, there's always another level to rise to. And as you begin to see your team rising, not complaining about them, not saying they're not working, seeing them succeeding, and as they see you rise, and as you coach them, hey, what's the story you're telling yourself? What's going on? I see the results. You've been stuck a little lately. You've been flat a little bit lately. Let's figure this out. Let's go back to when it was working a few years ago when you had these great years. Let's talk about what you did then and what you're doing now that's different. I want to help you win. That's languaging that your voice hears. It's filed, and then the bloodhound is on the track of you helping others win. If this resonates with you, you can pre-order the book. I gave you the way to contact me. You can also contact me at steve@stevelentini.com. I'll spell Lentini, L as in Linda, E as in Einstein, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, I as in India, N as in Nancy, and I as in India.com. steve@stevelentini.com. It's my passion to raise the small-minded thinking of humanity one person at a time, to wake people up to their power to create. All this complaining we do about each other, whether it's on a macro level or a micro level, let me reverse that, a micro level or a macro level. If you want to look at how people tell themselves a story, watch both of the political conventions this year. People railing and cheering and believing they're right. It's one reason I'm an independent voter today, right? Because I look at both sides. I'm looking for people that want to have a dialogue and compromise. That's what gets anything working in a company, in government, in a town, in a family. Think about it. Where's your own small-minded thinking? And for examples of it, just look into society. Where are examples of small-minded thinking? We've become very small-minded. Ben Franklin said that for people that are very wrapped up in themselves, they make a very small bundle. Is that what you want to be in life? Think about it. You have the power to create whatever it is you desire. As long as you're grateful, surrender to the lessons that come along the way, and embrace life as a friend, as a gift, that everything is working for you. or stay stuck in the victim of circumstance. That way, you have a story to tell on Friday night to your friends. You have a reason to escape, get out of your head, binge watch, or whatever you choose to escape with. You'll find friends that'll say, "Oh, you poor thing." Then they'll say, "Wow, you think that's bad. Wait till you hear my story." I don't want to hear the stories. How uncomfortable is it for people, you think, when they start to tell me a story and I say, "How'd you create that? What's your role in it? How are you responsible and accountable? What's your piece in this? What's your part in this? How is it serving you?" It's uncomfortable. Only those willing to rise above are willing to take on this kind of coaching. And thankfully, I make a living doing it because there are a lot of people who want to become the master of their circumstances. I'll leave that to you. If this makes sense, reach out. If it doesn't, that's okay. Tell the story about how I annoyed you and how full of shit I am. I don't care because I don't believe that. I know I'm making a difference and I love it. And I have proof in my own life and for those I coach. Thank you for listening. I'm grateful. I hope you take the journey and get onto the Neuro Gym and quit telling yourself a story because it's holding you back. Thank you.